Welcome to Hollywood Unapologetic. My name is Orlando Delbert. I wanted to speak a little bit about the growing fear of fascism, Manichaeism, as persuasion and propaganda, and the new Hollywood generation. You may be asking yourself, what in the world is such a serious topic has to do with the new Hollywood generation? The answer is everything. By definition, fascism is an authoritarian and nationalistic right-wing system of government, often as an extreme in their intolerant views and in their practice. Let's keep this in mind for a moment. This is an important time in history. All over the world, there is a transitional shift occurring sociologically, culturally, and politically. We live in a time where social unrest and images of war are read about and seen on the airwaves daily. As we turn on the morning news, there seems to be an endless succession of stories of discontent from all over the world and here at home in our local communities. Mankind has taken up arms against one another in the most brutal ways imaginable since the last World War. Videos and stories of people carrying out atrocities towards one another are being shared through different global media agencies and through first-hand accounts online via the internet. Add to this, a new Cold War era has been taking shape with increasingly more provocative rhetoric and behavior worldwide and growing warmer every day. America is also in a state of crisis. In the United States, mobs have taken control of cities when videos surface of unarmed citizens falling victim to shootings by law enforcement officers have been shared online and on social media, sometimes streaming in real time as the person's last breath has been captured by a sibling crying out loudly in grief. Without a doubt, there is a gross injustice taking place on our streets that affect the lives of those touched directly by those most recent killings, but also to us as a society. This is a problem that affects each and every one of us in urban centers and rural areas, and it is escalating. At this point in time in American history, a lot of focus in the media has been on race relations. Much of the focus has been on the shootings of black individuals, many of which were killed during a random traffic stop. This has caused an outrage all over the country with some very unfortunate consequences. Some of the news agencies are busy pointing fingers at groups of individuals based on race or religion, which in turn has direct negative influence on ignorant, uneducated, and undirected. This is very dangerous for many reasons. It stirs up emotions, which unfortunately can be driven and oftentimes is driven by hate, which can also very easily drive a mob into a frenzied state. The major media outlets have focused on these tragic events as direct and racially motivated attacks on black members of the community, but not nearly enough focus has been made on the bigger issue. This is not just a black problem. This is an American problem. The American problem is not at all a new problem either, with origins that can be traced back to the 17th and 18th centuries. As part of a master plan to get rid of the dregs of society in Britain, privileged and well-connected British men filled their ships with convicts, vagrants, and children of indigents, people that just were merely expendable. There was a belief that these indentured servants' hard work would somehow be reimbursement for the price of their voyage, or the hard-working conditions in this new land would simply leave them for dead. Either way, it was not the problem of Britain anymore. This is very much by design by the British upper classes. Some of the families that have survived to modern day, so-called white trash stereotypes and the accompanying detrimental prejudices stem from beliefs the white working class was an entirely separate race, made up of the ignorant and shiftless, that had the misfortune of inheriting disease-infested bloodlines, have been carried over for centuries. Arguably, some may believe they have mimicked the lives their parents and grandparents were born into: poverty, desperation, violence, misery, and congenital ignorance. Maybe this was the class of individuals whom Hillary Clinton was referring to when she mentioned supporters of Donald Trump were deplorable during her campaign for President of the United States in 2016. Or perhaps she saw some parallels between the rhetoric Trump was throwing around in speeches and tweets at 3 a.m. with the country's 7th president, Andrew Jackson. One thing for sure, neither Jackson nor Trump looked nor acted like a conventional politician, and that was part of their appeal. Jackson, aka Old Hickory, was arrogant, domineering, and showed excessive pride while attempted to be the direct representative of the common man. He was an outsider who prompted to clean up the corruption in Washington in the most uncompromisingly direct means possible. He would avoid debates based on logic and reason by challenging opponents to duels. He certainly did not act like a conventional politician of the time. Although Jackson betrayed the working class whites to the big landowners and the elites, his removal policy of the Native Americans, viewed by some colonists as powerless barbarians, made him popular. What was ironic was his constituents loved him, the same people he didn't bother to defend. If we fast forward to today, Trump has singled out Mexicans and other dark-skinned ethnicities as direct threats to America as part of his Making America Great Again presidential campaign. He said Mexicans are bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and he feels they must be deported, not to mention the Great Wall that needs to be built along our border with Mexico, which he expects Mexico to pay for. He has also said Muslims are terrorists and should be on a nationwide directory, and he called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. The latter sounds very much like the possible beginnings of what led to the relocation and incarceration of Japanese American families forced to live in internment camps after the attack of Pearl Harbor in 1941. Between 110 and 120,000 Pacific Coast residents of Japanese ancestry were moved under the orders of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, more than 60% of which were United States citizens. In the case of Trump, his outbursts during his speeches and his choice of language shows that there is significant lack of empathy towards the citizens of the United States. His inability to control emotional eruptions, sometimes triggered by personal arguments, are telltale signs of lack of self-discipline and his narcissistic hubris. On a global scale, this is dangerous because as president, he may want to act on impulse when conflicts arise abroad. This can make him extremely vulnerable by outside forces and plunge the United States into even more larger conflicts than already immersed in. Domestically, the same impulses may trigger sweeping governance over certain ethnicities of the citizenry to jail and to deport, as he has said repeatedly on his campaign trail. In addition, Trump has also shown contempt for the media. When news stories were presented that showed his character and business practices in a poor light, some reporters were banned from press conferences as part of his disdain towards news agencies. He then called out supporters and to the public to also look down at the media, who has already shown signs of repressing the free press. At the same time, he has also showed admiration toward Benito Mussolini, leader of the National Fascist Party and Prime Minister of Italy, who abandoned all pretense of democracy and set up a legal dictatorship in 1925, as well as current president of the Russian Federation Vladimir Putin, who was the chairman of the ruling party, the United Russia Party. Founder of the Center for the Study of Violence and Washington Psychotherapy, Alan J. Littman wrote in an article for CNN.com, The Narcissism of Donald Trump. His willingness to adopt and or exploit elements of any ideology, white nationalism, anti-Semitism, racism, and misogyny, is an indicator of this cynical view. It is an approach based upon the narcissistic wish to take what he wants and to break the rules in doing so, whether that be breaking contracts with the rules of personal consent, defying the usual definitions of decency and truth, or belittling the essential structures of elections and a democratic republic. And this is not in the interests of nation, but of self. He adds that the purpose of the presidency is to serve the American public, while Trump has a social Darwinistic philosophy that all must fight in a Manichaean struggle to win. Really think about the significance of what that one statement means to each and every one of us. Keeping within the context of this episode, the actions by him or someone else in his position can have a remorseless need for conflict, would have sweeping consequences on the American public and on a global stage. This has been seen throughout history by power-hungry dictators as a means to eliminate anyone by force that opposes or disagrees with them. I offer this not as an attack on either of the presidential candidates, nor of any persons on any ethnicity or social standings, but only as a presentation of how one person or a few individuals of influence may have a very profound effect with lasting consequences. I could have used as examples some of the bloodiest emperors of the Roman Empire who ruthlessly tortured and put to death anyone they felt were conspiring against them or saw as a threat to their positions of power, while also persecuting Christians. They all had suspicions of those around them, whether they were invented or exaggerated by their own imaginations and paranoia, which led to executions. Unquestionably, we live in an age where terrorist activity in the United States and abroad is a real danger. Wars, large and small, have taken place for years and continue to do so in an effort to stop these groups and their aspirations for delivering the apocalypse. Regardless of the interest on national security, some of the conversation presented to the American people is that some members of the populace who are non-white are enemies of the state, or better said, some of those considered to be miserable and marginalized are victims of poor genes, therefore they have allowed themselves to be manipulated into believing that people of any color, including impoverished whites or just anyone lacking economic means, must be the enemies of the middle and upper classes. Such openly racist stereotypes only fuels hatred, which can only bring dire results. This is extremely dangerous, as history has proven over and over again. What are we becoming? Have we reached a point where we must be at war with one another in our own neighborhoods? Have we become so afraid and unaccepting of others out of fear of not understanding someone who may be different than ourselves that we develop an unwillingness to accept someone different than us? Is that reason enough to take someone else's life? The unwillingness stems from the fear of the unknown, and all too often hatred can develop from that very same place. This has led to violence seen throughout history, and unfortunately, we are seeing it here more and more in the United States. Or is this yet another undisguised method of keeping the underclasses at odds with one another as part of a great design by pointing fingers at one another along with hatred-filled rhetoric, by using the poor as political cannon fodder, notwithstanding one's ethnicity? Regardless of the injustices that are happening in the world, in our cities, and in our neighborhoods, there must come a time where we as a society must make a conscious decision to not be the constant victim. I'm not supporting the view all too many have taken by setting on fire automobiles and looting businesses on their own neighborhoods as a way to denounce one's servitude to the system in play. Calling out law enforcement officers with racial slurs and using threatening physical behavior is not by any means the answer either. That only feeds the mob mentality and hinders progression. Instead, a more favorable action would be to come together as a community and be open to a constructive dialogue to those in power positions. This is all relevant in the context of a fascist America because the same steps are occurring now that politically and sociologically happened in Italy under Mussolini, in Spain under Franco, and under the Nazis in Germany, which led to World War II and the deaths of tens of millions. Adolf Hitler recognized during his time in the trenches during the First World War that war was incredibly stark, fought on the deception of the enemy. The Allies, especially the British, were masters at depicting the Germans as the embodiment of evil, bloodthirsty barbarians to their own people. This was through the successful exploitation of propaganda posters. This helped his realization that propaganda would need to be a key part of the future. The socialists of post-World War I Germany had an even greater impact on Hitler, implementing a new era of political manipulation. He admired the shrewd skill they had at promoting themselves, which could be seen in their propaganda posters, which led, in part, to their mass meetings. He then used what he had learned against them. The seizure of power would be won by methods of mass persuasion and propaganda, not through revolutionary means. The political poster was his spearhead of the movement. Dr. Paul Joseph Goebbels led the Ministry of Propaganda for the Nazi Party. He was the master of the big lie, and according to Goebbels, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such a time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. Really give some thought to the significance of that statement. History has proven that mass media can influence change, and have been used as propaganda tools because of its effectiveness. Today, the populace has been influenced through the exploitation of mass media for propaganda purposes, with an underlying driving force fueled by hatred and greed towards targeted groups of society that were considered to be underclass citizenry, with long-lasting sociological and global consequences. Add to that, President-elect Trump has a direct line to the populace using social media. His tirades are broken down to 140 characters at a time, followed by the news agency spreading it around for those who just happen to have missed it online. Everything mentioned has helped launch, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America campaign calling for peaceful demonstrations across the U.S. They understood and are using the power of no. The group has called for the citizenry to flood the streets in Washington, D.C. prior to the president-elect's inauguration to stop the Trump-Pence regime to go into office. They are calling for people to mobilize beginning on January 14th, the weekend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and to continue on in the hopes of stopping the new regime coming to power. Go to refusefascism.org to find out more. We as content creators are in a unique position to influence change, and it is our responsibility to do so. Think about it. More of us can get together to create films and television programming with a positive message, hire more people from broader backgrounds, and not limit ourselves and our potential by identifying one another only by race, color, sex, religion, or sexual preference. We can then, and only then, influence the masses to be more open-minded. This will give us the ability to have a broader reach of an audience, as well as potentially influence others to want to tell the stories as well, and hopefully not be less afraid to tell them. This is at the core of the new Hollywood generation movement taking shape today. The world is greatly influenced by what is seen on the screen and heard on the radio. Let's be the new Hollywood generation. Let's give them something that will drive everyone to do something bigger and make a positive difference in the world. It's something I'd like to leave you with. We are all in it together. Each and every one of you is an important part of our future. You are important to the lives of those who surround you. You are important to your communities. You are important to our industry. No matter what, remain optimistic and focused on your goal and never stop believing in yourself. Always remember, you are the key to your own success. Take a breath, move forward. Together, let's create a revival, a resurgence of Hollywood, and bring back the auteur to cinema. Be an active part of the new Hollywood generation. You are the representative of the new Hollywood generation. And please, subscribe to our channel and share. You are a representative of the new Hollywood generation. Join Hollywood Unapologetic in our quest to positively empower one another, to empower our industry as we speak openly to industry professionals about the true pursuit of our Hollywood dreams and in life. Hollywood Unapologetic is a continuation of the Pollyanna's tear-soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical series of books designed to help you better prepare for success. It is now our time to strive to be a better version of ourselves and to be inclusive of one another. We, as a community, can grow together and be the change our industry needs. We can find unity together and be the change our future needs. We are the new Hollywood generation. Welcome to Hollywood Unapologetic.